Welcome back. I wanted to make one last video before the elections. This video is going to be a forward for the video I'm going to upload on Friday about the culture wars. This video is going to deal with an issue that should not be debate. What is more important in these elections, the culture wars or the economy? And the answer is both. What happens is that we have to put the pieces in the right context. Farid Zakaria noticed 7 years ago and more recently another article that the Democratic Party has become the party of the well-educated and has been turning their back on the working class. This has been much better explained with lots of statistical data by Thomas Piketty in his two books about capital in the 21st century and capital and ideology. And it happens that as social democrat parties have been turning their back on the working class with their policies. It's not with their speeches, it's not with the words about which they are offended and nonsense like that. It's with their policies. As they have been turning their back on the working class, the right has been capitalizing those losses as gains, and as the far right has been getting more and more power and leverage on the right, well, the results are what we see nowadays. But how is that possible? Why has the Democratic Party become so discredited in the eyes of the working class? Well, in recent memory, people remember how life was during Trump's presidency. And when they compare their living standards, Trump looks much better. Of course, that implies comparing oranges and apples. Because as I mentioned in my video about the economy, Trump's years were years of irresponsible deregulation on the banking system, what led to the small panic which we experienced a year ago. Silicon Valley Bank, if you remember, and of irresponsible fiscal policy with tax cuts that increased the public debt, not for investments, a long-term investment like in the case of Biden, but for the sake of short-term consumption. And yet, the both Biden and Kamala Harris have been completely unable to translate that into a coherent comparison between their tenure and Trump's. They have been completely unable to come up with a sound narrative directed to the working class, which is badly needed, because with the levels of uncertainty we see among those making $50,000 or about $50,000 according to the New York Fed, a narrative trying to put things in context, a narrative helping them to make sense of their own experiences is a must, and they have completely neglected that. The Biden's message has been about helping manufacture, that is a 0.3 of the labor force, about the long term, And what about the short term when they go to the dollar store and they see that the dollar store is no longer the dollar store because now the 125, the 150, depending on the area. That brings us to extreme case that is the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic was also discredited before the eyes of the Germans because of two issues. The, the terrible conditions to which the depression and the Versailles Treaty imposed on Germans. The punitive reparations that resulted of that treaty were very short-sighted on the side of the Allies, but it was not just that, it was the humiliation imposed by, for instance, the French invasion of the German industrial zones when they were unable to keep paying those reparations. That brings us another front, a secondary but important front, that is foreign policy. Because when people cannot find reasons to be optimistic on the domestic side, on the economy, they try to find at least some compensation on how their country is seen in the eyes of the world. And on that, unfortunately, Biden's record has been even worse. The way he has duped Zelensky is going to have short-term consequences, of course, but the worst consequences are going to come in the long term. Because the question is, what happens if Putin wins? And if Putin wins, he will wait in our relations with China and imprint a privateer standard. And that should be foreseeable for anybody who knows something about foreign policy. Yet, Biden never bothered to frame the Ukraine war in terms of the national interest. Then you see the pathetic spectacle of Netanyahu crossing over and over the red lines imposed by Biden, and Biden dutifully supplying him with weapons in return. The FAT defensive system is just the most recent example of that. Another example, as I said, that is going to be more clear in the long term is the way the Biden administration has been putting Xi toward Putin, making it easier for a privateer like Putin, a mobster like Putin, to find refuge and inside a Yuan zone, especially if this Yuan zone consolidates and we succeed at isolating China. This will have other long-term consequences that are related to climate and nuclear that are going to be more evident in the medium term. And unfortunately, the benefits, the merits of the Biden administration are more nebulous for the voters because they are placed in the long term. Remember the Inflation Reduction Act. To make it worse, it's not just Biden, because it's going to be very hard for Kamala Harris to pedal back her declarations in the View, where she said that she could not think of anything she would have done differently from Biden. Another problem is the weakness, the cowardice of many liberal Democrats to establish a clear difference with the far left and their bizarre proposals in what they call, in what the right calls the gender theory or the gender agenda, and that has nothing to do with trans rights, with the needs of trans people, but with the bizarre positions of very people with very loud voices at the left, but with very uh, very little correlation with the needs of the working class. That brings us to the trust in government. We are at historic lows, at least since the times of Kennedy, according to the chart you can see made by the Pew Research. All this brings us parallels with the Weimar Republic that, of course, in comparing scale, we are not anywhere closer there, but the trend is, you could see that the trends are going in the same direction. And it's worth paying attention to that, because we are making the same mistakes in economic policy, in foreign policy, in isolating the extremes, and we should, and in the trust in government, and we should not be surprised if the appeal of the far right increases even if Trump loses. This brings us to the culture wars. It's sad to say, but South Park has become an oracle in many ways about the ways in which the most bizarre fringes of the left have come to silence in the voices, alternative liberal voices in the center left and left, to impose ridiculous agendas that have nothing to do with the interests of minorities. The interest, you just have to see the priorities of Black people, and you will not see the making Captain America black, or removing Jemima labels, or renaming bases, or any of the idiotic things that the Black Lives Matter have promoted. You could see the priorities of Latino people, and you will not see the right of being called Latinx, or of having a series called Oye Primo, or many idiotic things that have alienated many people in those communities. Because when you cannot have at least the solace of economic prosperity, and about hope, or at least some certainty about the present, you take refuge on your culture, or what you believe is your culture. And remember just two things about this. When it comes to the white community, to the white majority, it's a very dangerous thing in times of uncertainty to tease, to mock nostalgia, because nostalgia can be the refuge of the white community in times of uncertainty. Because if you mess up with nostalgia, then you should not be surprised when the white community end up voting against their own interest. First, because they no longer believe you. Second, because at least in times of uncertainty, in terms of malaise, they find some refuge in those memories. And I'm talking about not just about the Snow White, I know the remakes of Disney, the cases of video games. I'm talking about many of those things that seems to come from Sacha Baron Cohen characters in Who is America. And number two is the attitude about immigrants. Now, I think not just the attitudes towards immigrants have fallen, have turned very negative, but even draconian proposals like mass deportations are gaining support. And that's let me make again a parallel with the Weimar Republic. It was not just the Jews, it was many other minorities who were stigmatized and then suffered terribly before the Germans themselves end up suffering terribly. And this brings us finally to Roosevelt. Roosevelt, we should pay attention to how Roosevelt faced the culture wars of his time. The Father Coughlin, Townsend, although Father Coughlin was probably too long, were the most strident voices of his time. He faced that with policy and he prevailed. Even after the mistake he made in he at the beginning of his second term when he tried to tighten the budget too soon, he still prevailed and he was the hero of the working class, reelected 3 times, while probably Kamala Harris is going to lose, or even if he wins, is going to be with a very tight, by a very tight margin that is going to tie her hands during her administration. So, what to do right now in the short term? Well, again, follow FDR's advice. If you if you are before a situation, try something. If you were wrong, admit it frankly, and then try something else. But above all, try something. That's why we have not seen in the Biden administration, because of his fears about the Supreme Court in domestic policy, about his fears of Putin in the case of the Ukraine war, about his fears about anything. That's not how a president who wants to govern in difficult times like this should behave. So, are we in this transition in which this disappointment with economic policy is going to translate into much more difficult to reverse cultural trends? In my opinion, we are in that process. It's too late? I don't think so, because just consider the bump Kamala Harris got in August when she started proposing policy. When she started to present her program as a program not of benefits or the dole, as FDR would have put it, but an agenda of opportunity. What happens is that she then started to make less news about those policies and more about her love for Dick Cheney, for Liz Cheney, for her love, and all those idiotic things. If we consider that if it were too late, that could have made no effect, and consider that before Biden dropped out, Kamala Harris approval was terribly low. and yet he got a significant bump. So that bump would have not happened if it were too late. But then, in a country that wants change, that is overwhelmed by uncertainty, you cannot be the candidate of the status quo. You, where is Kamala Harris has spent more time rallying with Biden, with Liz Cheney, and even with Beyonce than with Walz. So where is Tim Walz? That's the question everybody asks, because it seems he's locked in Jennifer O'Malley Dillon's basement. And having said that, is it possible to reverse a trend like this? I believe so. But then you have to, if you are a liberal or a conservative, an honest conservative, you have to find the courage to say no to the extremes in your own party. The best way to do that is by starting right now to build that range of rational left and rational right, because expecting to get policy from the middle point between MAGA and woke is naive. And if you are for that, it's because you are very stupid or you are completely very incompetent. On the other hand, if you have ideas born inside this range between the far, that is between the rational right and the rational left, you will have some hope. It will not be overnight, because you cannot give visibility to build ideas and give them visibility overnight, but at least you will have hope, as we have, as the nation that went through the Great Depression found hope in FDR. Thank you.
Good evening. This is Brian Thomas Simons, and these are the main headlines of this hour.
An unknown source in Harris campaign leaked yesterday Kamala Harris' contingency plan to prevail in the upcoming elections after the steady decline of her numbers in the polls. According to this strategy, 1. Plan A. She will ask a genie to grant her that wish if she can find one. 2. Plan B. If counting with a genie is not possible, she will pretend to have cancer and contact the Make-A-Wish Foundation to get her wish of victory granted. 3. Plan C. If the Make-A-Wish Foundation is not willing to collaborate, she will re-air what her advisors consider has been her best moment in front of cameras, the time when she traveled to Guatemala to tell Central Americans, "Don't come. Don't come." 4. Plan D. If the re-air of her declarations in Guatemala also fails, she plans to start a live stream of her in distress from an undisclosed location, threatening to ingest a bottle of pills if she is not elected. Off the record, it was known that Harris' campaign manager was inclined to go directly to Plan DB. Acting Director of the Secret Service Ronald Rowe Jr. admitted the Secret Service has been unable to prevent President Biden from escaping the White House to participate in unrequested campaign events for Vice President Harris. The event in which President Biden made the "garbage" comment that has created so much upheaval recently is just the latest incident of this kind. We suspect he has been leaving the White House premises impersonating a tourist with the collaboration of campaign manager O'Malley Dillon. This is the third instance of incidents like this, and the president has refused our pleas for him to let the campaign take course without his participation, declared the acting director. C. Harris campaign manager O'Malley Dillon will use the last week before November 5 to enhance her national security credentials. To this end, she will parade in a tank as Dukakis did when he beat Bush in 1988, declared Mrs. O'Malley Dillon. When the reporter tried to correct her by saying that it was Bush who won in 1988, Harris' campaign manager ended her declarations abruptly and denounced the reporter for hate speech. D. Comedian Tony Hinchcliffe, who recently made infamous jokes about Puerto Rico at a recent Trump rally, regretted the only casualty of his appearance. Political commentator Megyn Kelly, the only attendant who laughed at his jokes, had to be taken to a local hospital after the Botox on her face gave up and the seams on her face broke while she laughed during the event. E. Tim Walz, Harris' partner in her bid for the presidency, was found locked in Harris campaign manager Jennifer O'Malley Dillon's basement. After many wondered why Harris was campaigning with Biden, Cheney, and even Beyoncé and Mr. Walz was nowhere to be seen, it was revealed that the unusual sequestration was part of the fine print of the contract Mr. Walz had signed to be admitted in the ticket. F. Recently J.D. Vance, Trump's partner in his presidential bid, declared, "If I have to create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do." As polled Republicans reacted positively to that statement, Mr. Vance agreed to an interview on Fox News where he declared that, 1. Yes. The whole purpose of the postmenopausal female is to help raise children. They'll have to change their ways. It'll be either that or they'll be treated as Mexicans and deported. That'll teach them not to vote for Democrats if you know what I mean. 2. I think most suburban women care about normal things that most Americans care about, not abortion. They'll have to adopt the values of Christian nationalism, as even Jesus admitted. It'll be either that or they'll be treated as Mexicans and deported. That'll teach them not to vote for Democrats if you know what I mean. 3. So many leaders of the left. They're people without kids trying to brainwash the minds of our children, and it's because of them that we are being left behind in the birth race against Putin. Women who want to serve in Congress should have to prove they have given birth to at least 4 children. Natural births. It'll be either that or they'll be treated as Mexicans and deported. That'll teach them not to vote for Democrats if you know what I mean. 4. You have women that think that truly the liberationist path is to spend 90 hours a week working in a cubicle at McKinsey instead of starting a family and having children. What they don't realize is that that is actually a path to misery. And because we need somebody to pay for Trump's next tax cuts, their taxes will be raised accordingly. It'll be either that or they'll be treated as Mexicans and deported. That'll teach them not to vote for Democrats if you know what I mean. 5. Look, I think 2 wrongs don't make a right. The wrong of rape or incest should not be followed by the equivalent wrong of abortion. Besides, allowing abortion for rape or incest would be condescending to the constitutions of southern states, which protect that southern tradition. It'll be either that or they'll be treated as Mexicans and deported. That'll teach them not to vote for Democrats if you know what I mean. 6. When corporations are so desperate for cheap labor that they don't want people to parent children, she's right to say abortion restrictions are bad for business. Corporate America is not especially friendly to parents with young children, and especially to moms with young children. And I think we have to promote a culture of pro-family thinking and pro-family policy in this country where we see children as blessings and as resources and not as curses. That's why we are against pay leave and childcare, and that's also why we gave them the short end in our 2017 tax cut. We'll provide them with pro-family thinking, and they will have to come up with the resources to raise those children while we cut financial aid to make sure they don't become a public burden. But it'll be for their own good. It'll be either that or they'll be treated as Mexicans and deported. That'll teach them not to vote for Democrats if you know what I mean. 7. Yes. All Facebook pages we take our news from have confirmed that Haitian migrants are eating pets, and yet the mainstream media insists in a campaign of disinformation claiming that this charge is untrue. That the fact that they eat every day is not enough proof. They claim that the Haitian population is not illegal due to their protected status, but Newsmax says differently. They claim that Haitian migrants are not spreading infectious diseases in the community. Yet Fox News confirmed that they are spreading Mexican diseases. If we want to make America great again, we have to put an end to their privileged lives. It'll be either that or they'll be treated as Mexicans and deported. That'll teach them not to vote for Democrats, if you know what I mean. Trump is now officially part of the working class. After his clumsy photo op with a garbage truck, candidate Donald Trump has officially become part of the working class, declared Trump spokesperson Caroline Leavitt. Also in agreement with that statement were 1. Contractors defrauded by the former president when he was a developer. 2. Graduates of Trump University who are still satisfied with their diploma despite it having reported no return on their investment. 3. Donors to the Trump Foundation who lost their money after it was applied to Trump's vanity spending. Yes, he pocketed our money that was intended for charity, but you can't deny that portrait was real good, can you? Declared one of the donors. 4. Hotel operators who were harmed due to violations of the emoluments clause when the former president was in the White House. We were very upset at the moment, but now it's all cool. Have you seen him dancing on the stage? And the story about Haitians. So not cool, but we used it to make lots of memes. How can you be angry at him after that? Declared a Hilton's Gen Z executive off the record. 5. Women who got settlements after Trump's past episodes of sexual misconduct, and even more by women who didn't get such settlements. 6. Male white voters without college degrees who got the short end of Trump's 2017 tax cuts and undermined health regulations. 7. Male white voters with college degrees as that gave them another reason to be offended. If they don't understand the importance of making Superman gay, they are beyond redemption, declared a scholar at Georgetown University off the record. 8. Non-white voters as that gave them another chance to vote against their own interest even if that was for reasons they couldn't understand. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez approached the Harris campaign with an emergency plan to reverse Harris' losses in swing states. This plan consists on 1. Make it mandatory to declare your pronouns in every communication with the federal government, including the judiciary. 2. Make it mandatory that athletes in women's sports be all trans. 3. Make it a felony punishable with up to 5 years for a cis, heterosexual, to reject the advances of a trans woman. 4. Make it mandatory that elementary schools offer a seminar aimed at persuading children that they are trans. 5. Make it mandatory for teachers in elementary school to be trans. 6. Make it mandatory for high school female students to have at least one abortion before their graduation. 7. Make it mandatory for all businesses with annual sales over $1,000 a year to have DEI consultants. Representative Rashida Tlaib proposed Harris campaign to complement Representative Ocasio-Cortez's plan with an initiative to protest Trump with dances. Just as it is being done in Argentina against Milei, we have already a trained dance troupe in Berkeley that is willing to perform in all 7 swing states. Once the working class sees them, Trump won't have a chance, declared the representative for Michigan. Former member of the Kennedy family and presidential candidate Robert Kennedy Jr., insisted that Donald Trump had promised him that he would lead the FDA and control the approval of drugs and food in the United States. His plans for the first 100 days will include 1. A halt of the production of drugs and food in the United States and territories until the evil alliance between corporations and bad aliens is exposed by the good aliens and replaced by a plan the good aliens will transmit to him in dreams. 2. Inoculating the population with a formula the good aliens will transmit to him in dreams to reverse the negative effects of the old inoculations to eradicate autism. 3. Paying respect to the dead Weimar doctor, according to his own unverified account, found in his brain for its contributions to his enlightenment on medical issues. 4. Replacing the faculties of medicine with seminars to be provided by the Heritage Foundation online at prices ruled by supply and demand.